I got fired by my boss's son on his first day. He had no idea that it would make his world collapse. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling and Company, casting golden patterns across the polished marble floors. Claire Thompson adjusted her navy blue blazer in the reflection of the glass partition that separated her cubicle from the bustling office beyond. She had been with the company for 7 years, rising steadily through the ranks to become one of their most trusted project managers. The familiar hum of keyboards clicking and phones ringing created a comforting background symphony that had become second nature to her. As she reviewed the quarterly reports on her dual monitors, Claire reflected on how much this place had shaped her life. Her desk was organized with military precision, color-coded folders lined up neatly, a framed photo of her parents smiling beside her during her college graduation, and a small ceramic elephant gifted by her team, for good luck, they had said. Each item carried its own story, each memory woven into the fabric of her professional journey. Her current project, the ambitious Horizon Initiative, aimed to revolutionize the company's digital infrastructure. After months of meticulous planning and late-night strategy sessions, they were finally ready to present it to the board next week. Claire felt the familiar flutter of excitement mixed with nervous anticipation as she double-checked the final analytics. This could be her crowning achievement at Sterling and Company, potentially opening doors to even greater opportunities within the organization. Unbeknownst to Claire, today would mark a turning point in her carefully constructed professional life. The corporate world she had come to know and trust was about to shift dramatically, though the calm before the storm still lingered in the air. As she reached for her coffee mug, emblazoned with the words "World's Okayest Project Manager," little did she know that the events unfolding elsewhere in the building would soon render that modest title obsolete. In the executive suite 2 floors above, a different kind of morning was taking shape. Alexander Sterling III, fresh from completing his MBA at Harvard, stood nervously adjusting his designer tie in front of the floor-length mirror in his new office. At 28, he had spent the last 3 years building his credentials while working overseas, deliberately keeping his distance from the family business. Now, with his father's health declining and the company facing unprecedented challenges in the digital age, Alex found himself thrust into the role he had always tried to avoid, heir apparent to Sterling and Company. His first day back in New York marked more than just a return to his roots. It represented a collision of worlds he had carefully kept separate. Growing up in the shadow of his father's empire, Alex had watched countless employees rise and fall based on quarterly numbers and boardroom politics. He had vowed to forge his own path, one that would prove he could succeed without riding on the Sterling name. Yet here he stood, preparing to make decisions that would affect hundreds of lives, including those of people who had worked for the company longer than he'd been alive. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders as he reviewed the personnel files spread across his mahogany desk. His father's handwritten notes in the margins provided stark assessments of each department head: too soft, needs modernization, lacks vision. Among these files lay Claire Thompson's, her impressive track record marked by consistent performance reviews and successful project completions. But what caught Alex's attention was the note scrawled across the top: comfortable in her position, needs shaking up. Alex's fingers tapped rhythmically against the desk as he considered his options. His management philosophy, honed through years of studying corporate turnarounds, emphasized disruption and innovation. He believed in challenging complacency, even if it meant making difficult decisions early on. The company needed a shock to its system, a clear signal that the old ways of operating were no longer acceptable. And what better way to establish his authority than to make an immediate impact? He glanced at his watch, 10:15 a.m. The Human Resources Director had scheduled a meeting with him at 11 a.m. to discuss organizational restructuring. As he closed Claire's file, a sense of determination hardened his features. He didn't know her personally, only through her records and his father's observations. To him, she represented exactly the type of long-term employee who might resist necessary changes. In his mind, sending a message through her termination would demonstrate his commitment to transforming the company, regardless of tenure or past success. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was about to fire someone on his very first day. But Alex convinced himself it was necessary. After all, great leaders made tough decisions, and sometimes sacrifices were required for the greater good of the organization. Little did he know how profoundly this decision would alter not just Claire's life, but his own trajectory as well. The summons came at 10:45 a.m., delivered by a nervous assistant who couldn't quite meet Claire's eyes as he handed her the message. Her heart sank as she read the simple instruction: please report to Mr. Sterling's office immediately. 7 years of corporate experience told her exactly what this meant. When senior management wanted to see you unexpectedly, especially when summoned by a generic assistant, it rarely ended well. Walking through the familiar corridors toward the executive suite, Claire felt the walls closing in around her. The same hallways that had witnessed her rise through the ranks now seemed to mock her impending downfall. As she approached the heavy oak door bearing the nameplate Alexander Sterling III, her legs threatened to give way beneath her. Taking a deep breath, she knocked twice and entered. The young man behind the desk barely looked up from his papers. "Ms. Thompson, thank you for coming so promptly," he said, his voice carrying the practiced confidence of someone trying too hard to sound authoritative. Claire's initial confusion turned to shock as she realized this was her boss's son, the prodigal heir she'd heard whispers about but never met. His youth struck her first, then his obvious discomfort as he avoided direct eye contact. "I've reviewed your file thoroughly," he began, shuffling papers unnecessarily. "While your performance has been adequate, we need to make some changes. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately." The words hit Claire like a physical blow, each syllable registering with increasing disbelief. Before she could respond, he continued, "You'll receive your severance package details shortly. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." The room spun as Claire processed the surreal scene. Her mouth opened and closed several times before any sound emerged. "But, the Horizon Initiative? We're presenting to the board next week." Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Alex's face remained impassive, though his fingers gripped the edge of his desk slightly tighter. "I'm sure others can take over your responsibilities," he replied, his tone clipped and official. "Now, if you'll excuse me." He reached for his phone, clearly signaling the end of their conversation. Claire stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing through 7 years of dedication, reduced to this moment of callous dismissal. As security arrived to escort her out, she caught one last glimpse of Alex avoiding her gaze, his jaw set in determination that bordered on defiance. In the elevator descending to her floor, Claire's reflection in the mirrored walls showed a woman transformed. Gone was the confident project manager who had walked into work that morning. In her place stood someone whose entire professional identity had just been stripped away. When she reached her cubicle, colleagues pretended to be busy, their sympathetic glances cutting deeper than any words could. With mechanical movements, she packed her personal items into a cardboard box, the ceramic elephant, the photo of her parents, a few pens, and her favorite coffee mug. Each item placed inside felt like another piece of her professional soul being torn away. As she passed through the lobby for the last time, the security guard's presence felt like an unnecessary insult. The receptionist who had greeted her every morning for 7 years refused to meet her eyes. Outside, the city bustled on, oblivious to her personal catastrophe. Claire stood on the sidewalk, clutching her box of belongings, feeling like a ghost haunting the corporate world she had once called home. The realization that she hadn't even been given a chance to defend herself or explain the importance of her current projects made the dismissal feel even more unjust. For the first time in her career, Claire Thompson understood what it meant to be truly powerless. Back in his office, Alex stared at the closed door through which Claire had just departed. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the personnel file again, flipping through its contents with growing unease. The more he read, the more his confidence wavered. 7 years of exemplary service, consistently exceeding targets, multiple commendations for innovative solutions, none of this aligned with his father's cryptic note about comfort zones. The Horizon Initiative documents, left in the folder by mistake, painted an even more troubling picture. The project's scope and potential impact were staggering, far beyond anything Alex had encountered during his studies or international consulting work. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from various department heads, all expressing concern about Claire's sudden departure. She was supposed to present the Horizon Initiative next week, read one from the IT director. "Without her, we're dead in the water," warned another from the finance team leader. Each notification chipped away at Alex's certainty, replacing it with a gnawing sense of dread. He had anticipated resistance to change, but not this level of unified pushback from experienced executives who outranked him. The weight of his decision pressed down on him as he recalled Claire's shocked expression during their brief encounter. Her controlled demeanor had cracked just enough to reveal the depth of his mistake. The way she had mentioned the Horizon Initiative with desperate urgency, he hadn't even known what it was at the time. Now, staring at the detailed projections and implementation plans, he understood why she had sounded so devastated. This wasn't just another project, it represented the future direction of the entire company. Panic began to creep in as Alex realized the magnitude of his error. He had fired one of the company's most valuable assets, someone who had been instrumental in positioning Sterling and Company for technological transformation. The irony hit him like a freight train. In his attempt to demonstrate decisiveness, he had potentially derailed the very progress he had been brought in to accelerate. The board meeting scheduled for next week loomed like an approaching storm, and now he faced the prospect of explaining why their flagship initiative was suddenly leaderless. His father's words echoed in his mind, "Sometimes being right isn't enough, son. You have to be smart about how you implement change." Alex had dismissed the advice as typical parental caution, preferring instead to follow his business school textbook's prescriptions for rapid organizational overhaul. Now, alone in his office with mounting evidence of his miscalculation, he understood the wisdom he had ignored. The corporate culture he had sought to disrupt wasn't merely resistant to change, it was dependent on people like Claire Thompson to implement it successfully. As the afternoon wore on, Alex found himself paralyzed by indecision. Every attempt to reach out to other department heads for damage control met with polite but firm refusals to discuss the matter further. The isolation he had imposed upon himself through his actions became increasingly suffocating. The weight of leadership, which he had thought he understood, revealed itself in its true complexity, a delicate balance between vision and practicality, between decisive action and thoughtful consideration. Claire's empty cubicle stared back at him every time he ventured onto the main floor, a silent accusation of his hubris. The team members who had once eagerly sought his opinions now avoided his gaze, their body language speaking volumes about their loss of faith in his judgment. What had started as an attempt to establish his authority had instead undermined it completely. The corporate machine he had thought to command was proving far more complex than any case study he had analyzed, and the consequences of his actions were rippling outward in ways he couldn't yet fully comprehend. Across town, Claire sat in her small apartment, the box of office belongings untouched on her dining table. The familiar routine of returning home after work felt strange and wrong, the hours stretching endlessly before her. She stared at the ceramic elephant, remembering the day her team had presented it to her. "For bringing us all good luck," they had said, their smiles genuine and full of respect. Now, sitting alone in the quiet apartment, she wondered if she had really earned that respect, or if it had all been an illusion. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from former colleagues offering support and expressing outrage at her treatment. Some suggested legal action, others proposed starting her own consultancy. But through the fog of shock and anger, Claire found herself drawn to memories of the Horizon Initiative. The project had consumed her for months, becoming more than just work. It had been a testament to everything she believed about innovation and progress. To have it ripped away so abruptly felt like losing a part of herself. Pacing her living room, Claire's thoughts kept returning to Alexander Sterling's face during their brief encounter. Beneath the bravado, she had detected uncertainty, perhaps even fear. It occurred to her that firing her might have been an attempt to prove something, either to himself or to others in the company. Her professional experience told her that people rarely made such drastic decisions without some underlying pressure or insecurity driving them. The question was whether this insight made his actions more or less forgivable. The injustice of it all burned hottest when she considered the timing. Just days before the crucial board presentation, years of preparation and dedication dismissed with a few cold words. Yet alongside the anger simmered a more dangerous emotion, doubt. Had she become too comfortable in her position, as Alex's father had apparently noted? Was she guilty of resisting necessary change simply because it threatened her established routines and successes? These questions gnawed at her, complicating her righteous indignation with uncomfortable introspection. Her laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, the email draft to her contacts list unfinished. Should she send out feelers for new opportunities immediately, or take time to process what had happened? The financial cushion of her severance package offered breathing room, but the emotional toll demanded attention. As evening fell, Claire realized she faced a choice similar to the one she had helped navigate for her teams at Sterling and Company, whether to react impulsively to the situation or to approach it strategically, using her experience to transform this setback into something meaningful. Meanwhile, Alex found himself unable to focus on anything except the ramifications of his decision. Each attempt to move forward with his planned organizational changes met with passive resistance from department heads who had previously shown enthusiasm. During meetings, he noticed subtle shifts in body language, crossed arms where there had been openness, careful wording where there had been candor. The corporate culture he had sought to reshape was instead reshaping him, teaching lessons about power dynamics and institutional memory that no textbook could convey. His evenings became consumed with research into the Horizon Initiative, each document revealing more about the depth of Claire's contributions. The project's potential applications extended far beyond what he had initially grasped, hinting at innovations that could redefine Sterling and Company's market position. More troubling was the discovery of correspondence between Claire and key industry partners, indicating relationships and alliances he hadn't considered in his hasty decision-making. The network she had cultivated represented years of careful relationship building, now potentially compromised by his actions. Professional doubts intertwined with personal reflections as Alex wrestled with sleepless nights. His Harvard credentials, once a source of pride, now felt like hollow achievements compared to Claire's demonstrated impact on the company. The theoretical knowledge he had acquired paled beside her practical expertise and deep understanding of Sterling and Company's operations. Each morning, looking in the mirror, he saw not the confident leader he had hoped to become, but someone who had acted out of arrogance and misunderstanding. The gap between his intentions and their consequences widened daily. His attempts to engage with department heads about moving forward without Claire were met with polite skepticism. She understood how to get things done here, the marketing director had said, choosing her words carefully. Not everything works according to textbook models. These conversations forced Alex to confront the limitations of his academic training and the complexities of real-world corporate dynamics. The elegant theories he had learned were proving inadequate in the face of actual human relationships and institutional history. Most unsettling was the growing realization that his decision had affected more than just Claire's career. Teams across departments were showing signs of disengagement, their morale shaken by the abrupt removal of a respected colleague. Projects unrelated to the Horizon Initiative were experiencing delays, as staff members became increasingly cautious in their work, afraid of drawing attention from the new management. The atmosphere of innovation and risk-taking that Claire had fostered was rapidly giving way to a culture of self-preservation and minimal effort. In his darkest moments, Alex questioned whether he was truly cut out for this level of responsibility. The weight of leadership, which he had romanticized during his studies, now felt crushing and isolating. Every decision seemed to carry implications he couldn't fully anticipate, every action setting off chain reactions he struggled to control. The corporate world he had returned to lead was proving far more complex and nuanced than he had ever imagined, and his initial attempt at dramatic change had only highlighted his own inadequacies. As days turned into weeks, the aftermath of Alex's decision continued to ripple through Sterling and Company's ecosystem. Industry partners who had been collaborating with Claire on the Horizon Initiative began withdrawing their support, citing concerns about project continuity. The company's stock price, already under pressure from market fluctuations, dipped further as rumors of internal instability spread through financial circles. Analysts who had previously praised Sterling and Company's innovative direction now questioned the company's leadership stability. Within the organization, the effects manifested in more subtle but equally damaging ways. Younger employees, who had looked to Claire as a mentor and role model, grew hesitant to pursue ambitious projects. The vibrant culture of innovation she had nurtured began to calcify, replaced by a cautious mentality that prioritized safety over progress. Department heads, previously eager to experiment with new approaches, now ran every decision through multiple layers of approval, slowing productivity to a crawl. The media picked up on the story, portraying Claire's dismissal as symptomatic of broader issues in corporate America. Business journals ran pieces questioning the wisdom of replacing experienced leadership with untested heirs, while social media platforms buzzed with discussions about generational differences in management styles. Former Sterling employees shared stories of Claire's mentorship and leadership, painting a picture of a company culture that had valued merit and dedication over pedigree and connections. For Alex, the external scrutiny added another layer of pressure to an already overwhelming situation. Investor calls became minefields of carefully worded questions about leadership stability and strategic direction. Board members who had initially supported his aggressive approach to change management now expressed concerns about stakeholder confidence. The very networks he had hoped to impress with his decisive action were instead questioning his judgment and fitness for leadership. Perhaps most significantly, the Horizon Initiative itself began to fracture. Without Claire's guiding vision and established relationships, component parts of the project started to drift apart. Technical teams lost cohesion with marketing strategies, while financial projections became increasingly disconnected from operational realities. The integrated approach that had promised to revolutionize Sterling and Company's operations was dissolving into isolated initiatives, each struggling to maintain momentum without central coordination. Through all these developments, Alex found himself increasingly isolated. Attempts to rebuild trust met with polite but distant responses, while efforts to restructure teams around new leadership consistently fell short of expectations. The corporate machine he had sought to command was proving far more complex than any theoretical model, its interconnected parts responding to his initial misstep in unpredictable and cascading ways. What had begun as a single decision to remove one employee had evolved into a fundamental challenge to the company's entire operational framework and cultural foundation. The tension between Alex's leadership style and the company's established culture reached a breaking point during a particularly contentious strategy meeting. Seasoned executives, emboldened by weeks of observing his growing uncertainty, began openly questioning his decisions. "Your Harvard theories don't account for 30 years of institutional knowledge," snapped the chief financial officer, his voice carrying the weight of decades at Sterling and Company. Other department heads nodded in agreement, their pent-up frustration finally finding voice. Alex's attempts to assert authority only deepened the divide. Each directive he issued met with subtle resistance or creative interpretation, leaving him increasingly powerless to effect real change. The organizational chart might have placed him at the top, but the actual flow of influence and information was bypassing him entirely. Employees developed elaborate workarounds to circumvent his policies, while critical updates found their way to other executives before reaching his desk. The psychological toll became evident in both his professional and personal life. Migraines that had started as occasional annoyances became daily occurrences. His once immaculate appearance deteriorated as sleepless nights took their toll. Colleagues noticed the change but offered no sympathy. Instead, they saw confirmation of their doubts about his capability to lead. Even his father's occasional calls, filled with concerned questions about company performance, carried an undertone of disappointment that cut deeper than any public criticism. In private moments, Alex found himself compulsively researching Claire's career trajectory, piecing together a picture of the leader he had so carelessly dismissed. The more he learned, the more he understood how fundamentally he had misjudged both her value to the company and the complexity of the role he had assumed. His initial confidence in applying textbook solutions to real-world challenges now seemed dangerously naive. The weight of his mistake pressed down on him, manifesting in physical symptoms and mental exhaustion that no amount of privilege or education could alleviate. As the situation at Sterling and Company continued to deteriorate, both Alex and Claire found themselves grappling with increasingly complex emotional landscapes. For Alex, the isolation extended beyond the office walls, affecting his personal relationships and self-perception. Friends from business school, whom he had once impressed with tales of his imminent leadership role, now offered awkward condolences or avoided his calls altogether. Family gatherings became tense affairs where his father's disappointed glances spoke volumes, while his mother's forced cheerfulness only highlighted the depth of his failure. The luxurious penthouse apartment that had once symbolized his success now felt like a gilded cage, its emptiness echoing his professional shortcomings. Claire, meanwhile, discovered that unemployment brought unexpected revelations about her own identity and values. Without the structure of corporate life, she began noticing aspects of herself that had been subsumed by her professional role. Late-night walks through her neighborhood revealed a community she had barely acknowledged during her years of dedicated work. Chance encounters with local business owners sparked conversations about alternative career paths and entrepreneurial possibilities. The initial anger and hurt gave way to a more nuanced understanding of her capabilities and desires, prompting questions about whether she truly wanted to return to the corporate world at all. Their parallel journeys of self-discovery intersected in subtle ways through the company's continued struggles. Alex's attempts to salvage the Horizon initiative without Claire's expertise led him to reach out to industry contacts she had cultivated, only to discover how deeply her professional network had been intertwined with the project's success. Each conversation with these partners revealed another layer of her influence and another dimension of what he had destroyed. Meanwhile, Claire found herself fielding discreet inquiries from former colleagues about potential consulting arrangements, forcing her to confront whether she could, or should, re-engage with a company that had betrayed her trust. The emotional weight of these developments manifested differently for each of them. Alex's anxiety attacks became more frequent, triggered by everything from board meeting reminders to passing views of Claire's former cubicle. His attempts to seek counsel from mentors or therapists were complicated by the unique position of being both victim and perpetrator of his circumstances. Claire, on the other hand, experienced periods of profound clarity interspersed with waves of grief for the career she had loved and lost. The ceramic elephant from her office collection became a talisman of sorts, its presence on her kitchen counter reminding her both of past accomplishments and the uncertainty of her future path. As weeks turned into months, the boundaries between their individual struggles began to blur. News of Sterling and Company's ongoing challenges reached Claire through various channels, industry publications, former colleagues' updates, even casual mentions in professional networking groups. Each report of the company's difficulties carried a bittersweet resonance, acknowledging the validity of her contributions while underscoring the magnitude of their loss. Similarly, Alex's awareness of Claire's resilience and adaptability grew with every passing day, as he observed how former team members rallied around her absence and how industry partners maintained loyalty to her vision despite her departure. These parallel experiences created an invisible thread connecting them across the divide of their circumstances. Both found themselves questioning fundamental assumptions about success, leadership, and personal worth. Their shared history at Sterling and Company became a mirror reflecting their respective growth and vulnerabilities. The pain of their separation, professional though it was, served as a catalyst for deeper understanding of themselves and the complex web of relationships that defined their professional lives. In this liminal space between past and future, between loss and possibility, they each began to recognize that the true measure of their worth lay not in titles or positions, but in the lasting impact they had on the people and projects they touched. Months later, after a particularly disastrous board meeting where Sterling and Company's future seemed bleaker than ever, Alex made a bold decision. He reached out to Claire personally, not through intermediaries or formal channels, but with a heartfelt apology and an unconventional proposal. Recognizing her irreplaceable value to the company, and humbled by his own mistakes, he offered her not just her old position, but a seat on the executive board as Chief Innovation Officer, along with full autonomy to lead the Horizon Initiative. Claire, after much deliberation and encouragement from former colleagues who had rallied around her during her time away, agreed, but on one condition: Alex would work directly under her guidance for 6 months to learn the nuances of the company's culture and rebuild trust. To everyone's surprise, Alex embraced this arrangement wholeheartedly, admitting that he still had much to learn about leadership beyond theory. Under Claire's mentorship, the Horizon Initiative flourished, transforming Sterling and Company into an industry leader in digital innovation. The partnership between Claire and Alex evolved into a deep mutual respect, proving that growth often comes from failure and humility. Together, they created a workplace culture that valued experience and fresh ideas equally, ensuring the company thrived for years to come. In the end, what began as a devastating collapse became the foundation for something stronger, a testament to forgiveness, resilience, and the power of second chances.